And we'll share both the recording of today's meeting and the chat log in tomorrow's CCS news. So if you miss some of the comments in the chat, don't worry, we're saving them and we'll share them with everybody tomorrow.
Yep. Okay, so now that we're officially started, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining our networking session today. I know everyone's got very busy with meetings, so I really appreciate you taking some time to sit with your colleagues and just kind of discuss some of the relevant questions that are going on. So once again, we've got a large group of people. We've got about 120 registered for today. So everyone will be muted as they come in, just so the sound doesn't get overwhelming. But please unmute yourself whenever you want to jump in and add something to the conversation, answer a question, and then you can remute yourself afterwards. Since we have a lot of people here, if you're mentioning any kind of library specific plans, if you could try to mention your library name too along with it, just so people have context about like who's doing what, that would be fantastic. So Deborah's going to be monitoring the chat just in case you don't have audio or your audio is on the fritz. And like she said, both the session and the chat is going to be recorded and shared with the CCS News for anyone who isn't able to make it today or wants to reference it back in the future. So I'm going to just share my screen so we can have the agenda up here. There we go. Thank you for everyone who submitted agenda topics and questions. As you can see, we had some very distinct themes that came up. So we tried to group the discussion accordingly. There are some other questions that were submitted that we just don't have answers for right now until like the next governing board meeting happens, or until Rails is able to kind of determine what's going to happen with delivery and whatnot. But I think we've got a lot of really awesome things to talk about today. We're going to make one quick modification. We had agenda topic number for the update on the IMLS, the TEL study, say for the end of the meeting, but instead we're going to move that up to the top of the meeting, just so we can give you up front just whatever, I don't know if you want to call it an update because it's not really an update, but where we're at right now with that. So Deborah's going to give the update on the study. I will let her have the floor for a moment here.
Perfect. So some of you may have already heard the latest update on this IMLS OCLC study. Dee Brennan from Rails is serving on that advisory committee for that group. The most recent update that we've heard from Rails is that the first phase of the IMLS OCLC Battelle study, it will cover public library materials handling, but that phase will run through August of 2020. So they don't expect that first phase to conclude until later in the summer. Initial results have altered Rails' recommendation for quarantining materials. Rails has increased the recommendation for quarantine materials from 72 hours up to 7 days. So it's CCS's recommendation to governing board that CCS libraries have a shared quarantine period of 7 days. That recommendation will go to governing board for approval next Wednesday. At this time, we would anticipate that shared quarantine period will be approved by them at their meeting next Wednesday. So again, that recommended quarantine period has been increased from that initial 72 hours up to 7 days. Does anyone have any questions? And again, if you have questions, feel free to unmute yourself.
Hi, I have a question. If we're moving the quarantine to 7 days, is it possible, I know right now we at Round Lake Area Library have a 3-day grace period, meaning that they will not get charged any fines. Can we extend that grace period to say like 10 days so that it gives us time to quarantine and not have to worry about backdating those quarantined items and things like that, just in case of human error or something like that?
Absolutely. We can manage this in a few different ways, and Mieko, jump in if I'm forgetting anything. We can certainly increase the number of grace period that your library offers. We can also increase the default number of free days that are applied at check-in for each library. So we can, for example, set for both normal and check-in the default number of free days that will be applied to be 10 or 7 or 9 or whatever number you would prefer. We could also modify your fine period codes as well to increase the number of grace periods that would be applied to each fine code.
So there's a question in the chat on why did it increase from 3 days to 7 days?
I believe that initial results from various studies show that the virus is not necessarily gone from materials within 72 hours. So the recommendation was increased to 7 days.
And another question about what the difference is between free days and a grace period. So with grace period, if the patron, let's say your grace period is 3 days, if your patron returns that item overdue but within the grace period, they will not be charged overdue fines. Once it reaches like that 4th day and they return it, they will be charged fines for all 4 days that's overdue. Whereas with the free days, the patron just won't be charged fine for whatever amount of time that you set. So if you set free days to 3 days and the item is 5 days, returned 5 days overdue, the patron will only be charged for 2 days.
I'm gonna pop a link into the chat. This study was shared with governing board. This study did find that droplets of the virus could still be present on materials on day 7. And again, this IMLS OCLC Patel study is studying the virus's lifetime on different types of library materials. But this study that I shared with you has a little bit more information about some of the research that's out there in the universe.
And then in terms of, there were some questions in chat about cleaning the items. At this time, governing board is just talking about quarantine period and not physical cleaning. So I know, governing board will be meeting next Wednesday. Is that correct, Deborah?
Yes, that's correct.
And they'll be discussing some of the pending questions in terms of system-wide decisions, including the system-wide quarantine period. After governing board, we will be doing another member update. So watch for the dates and the details in the upcoming CCS news.
Yeah, right now we have that member update scheduled for Thursday, May 28th at 11 a.m. So we'll share the registration link for that in tomorrow's newsletter. And at that meeting, we'll be able to review all of the decisions that governing board made at their meeting next week. So stay tuned and make sure you register for that live update.
Well, are we ready to jump in on some questions about, so the big chunks of questions that we got through with the agenda submissions surrounded safety in the library and curbside pickup. So I thought we'd start with safety in the library. So a lot of people were interested in kind of hearing what your library's big safety concerns are and how your library is preparing for them. So I do have some specific questions in here, but if there's anything you want to add independently, please feel free. But the first question I want to pose to the group, is your library thinking about stopping circulating certain types of items, especially now that libraries have these this extensive library of things like cake pans and canvas bags and like telescopes, sewing machines, equipment, that sort of thing. Is there anything that your library is thinking about putting a pause on sharing at the moment?
Yeah, at Lake Forest, certain obvious things, puppets, puzzly things. There's some of our takeout tech we're going to be rethinking. Some of the stuff that's easy to clean, we probably might still do, but we're not sure. But yeah, things other than basic, straightforward movies, CDs, books, things that are easy to rotate are probably more what we're going to be doing. I would imagine some of the kits and things that have lots and lots of pieces and are going to be hard for us to count and keep up with. I think those will be slowly phased in after we're at least probably past curbside.
Yeah.
I'm muting now.
Thanks, Tori. Yeah, it sounds like, so a chat from Katie, steam kits from Winnetka Northfield. We'll be holding off on circulating those. And Roundley.
So Morton Grove are also steam kits.
Yeah.
And, we discussed the reusable tote bags, and because we're going to be doing curbside with bags that we're going to give to the patrons, we figure that we won't need to use the reusable totes.
That's a good point.
It seems like other libraries are chiming in the chat that libraries are putting a hold on circulating your library of things items. And then Anne mentioned therapy dolls and telescopes won't be circulated at Prospect Heights.
The Fox River Valley libraries, kind of echoing what other libraries have said, we're putting a halt on our canvas bags. We also have STEAM kits and early learning kits that we're not circulating in addition to our American Girl doll kits. For right now, we only have one Dropbox open, and we don't really want patrons to be returning tech materials like laptops or hotspots through that. So the ones that are currently out, we're just encouraging people to just hold on to them. But like Tori kind of mentioned, we're trying to figure out the best practice for those tech items. And then the kits, mostly because they're like a cloth-based or hard to clean materials, they also just don't fit through the book drop. So just for right now, those are getting a full stop.
I think it was, is it Roberta that says our barometer right now is, will it fit in the book drop return? So yeah. Oh, and this is interesting. So Donna says she received a letter from medical office that says they'll no longer have magazines in the offices, toys for kids to play with, and sign-in sheets. Which, when you think about it, yeah, how many people in a medical office, you know, just sit and browse through everything? So, sense.
And that was a discussion that came up yesterday at the technical services group as well. A question came up, what are libraries doing with their newspapers? So a number of libraries mentioned they paused their newspaper subscriptions during this time and are still trying to figure out what they're going to do with newspapers once they reopen, since those are collections that typically you encourage patrons to take your magazines and newspapers off the shelf and sit in the library and read them, but how do you manage those collections once you reopen? So I think that might be TBD. We'll have to figure it out as we go, but hopefully this IMLS OCLC Battelle study, because it's specifically looking at public library materials, hopefully we might get some guidance from that study on how long we might need to quarantine these materials, or if it's even safe to continue to have them. And I will add one more comment, is that so CCS has been extending due dates for materials. So right now, materials won't be due until July 1st. So we will continue to extend material due dates as needed through the stay-at-home order. And again, if you need to work with us on further extensions of due dates, please open a help desk ticket and we can get started with you on that.
Oh, and Rosa's, Indian Trails is going to allow members, their local members, to put their hot pick books on hold during phase 1 and phase 2. So it's kind of like, that's a good way to kind of balance out, you know, collections that may not be available at the moment to patrons, making other ones a little more flexible in terms of their availability. Park Ridge too, nice.
Tori at Lake Forest, when you, since we'll probably have to extend beyond June 1st just for safety's sake, how much of a jump are you doing when you do an extension? Do you have a set amount of time you're doing the extensions for? 3 weeks, 2 weeks? If you had to extend June 1st, how long would you extend it for?
So right now due dates are July 1. So we had when that stay-at-home order was extended through May, we just did a bulk extension of due dates till
got my
July.
month wrong.
I get my months confused these days. There is a recommendation for governing board, and I'm just going to pull that up really quickly so I do not tell everyone the wrong thing. That we will continue to extend due dates. Let me just pull this up. We will continue to bulk extend due dates through phase 2 of the Illinois plan for reopening. So we're still in phase 2 right now, so we'll continue to make sure that due dates are extended. Again, we're ahead of the game. We have extended them till July already. And then after phase 2 is completed, then we'll work with libraries individually to extend due dates. It'd be helpful if we could have a couple days notice if you'd like to bulk extend due dates. But we have a process in place since we've done it so often over the past couple of months that it doesn't take us too much time to do that extension. But as always, a couple days notice prior to a due date extension that you would like to request is always very helpful.
So it sounds like a number of other libraries are moving some of their like hot picks and new magazines into the regular circulating and or holdable collection. So nice. Moving on, we can always come back to that if anyone does think of anything they want to add in. But moving on to the next question, what types of PPE are you hoping to have for frontline staff? And will there be any libraries recommending to boards or administration that they wear face shields in addition to face masks? I'm going to guess a lot of libraries are doing gloves and masks and that sort of thing.
Gloves and masks at Lake Forest. We haven't spoken about shields, but they are working on plastic, like at the Jewel, at the desk to cover the staff.
Hi, I'm going to chime in. Indian Trails. We do have face shields for our staff. We are offering them up to anyone during our phase 1 who absolutely feel like they need one while they are in the library for phase 1. That we're going to have limited staff in our building, only 20 at a time per shift, per 4-hour shift. But when we go into phase 2 and we open up our drive-up window, they are an expectation to wear a face shield along with a mask to do the drive-up service. So that's a hard yes for the drive-up window. Phase 1, masks and gloves, optional if they want to wear the face shield, but it's not a mandatory thing that they have to do.
Thanks, Rosa.
Yep.
And we've got some comments coming in the chat. Anne says that staff will wear gloves and masks, and they're also considering aprons or some other type of covering for staff who are emptying the book drop. At Round Lake, masks and gloves as well, and they're providing Clorox wipes and hand sanitizer, as well as disposable aprons, paper bags to dispose of masks, and then spray disinfectant. Oh, Anne also says, this is interesting, that they're planning to purchase keyboard covers for easy cleaning of keyboards. That is a great idea. And then Roberta says they ordered oversized t-shirts for staff to wear as a kind of like protective cover for clothing. And that Round Lake also ordered shoe coverings as well. So some really great ideas for protecting and keeping staff safe coming in here in the chat. And again, we'll be sharing the chat log with everyone so that you'll be able to reference all of these comments that are coming in. I do see a note from Chusi that Pritzker potentially might extend the, or that we might not peak in Illinois until mid-July. And I believe, Chusi, you're asking if we'll be extending due dates again. Again, we'll continue to extend due dates for materials throughout phase 2 of the Illinois plan. Beyond phase 2 into phase 3, we'll work with libraries to extend due dates as applicable to your situation. So we're more than happy to extend due dates. We'll do it for everybody through phase 2. You don't have to request any extensions. So if something happens and Illinois stays in phase 2 through June, we'll continue to extend due dates into August or beyond if we need to. But once we move out of phase 2 into phase 3, then we'll work with libraries on a library by library basis to extend due dates as is needed for your institution. So we're more than happy to be more generous if extending due dates farther out is what would work best for you.
I just have a question for the group, Tori and Lake Forest. How are your staffs feeling about people who might want to wear personally made face guards? Is anyone going to have a policy on that, or does it matter?
I can chime in. Our launchpad staff did make cloth masks for all of the staff. They came in different shifts and did that, but we will also have disposable masks. The staff, however, are going to be expected to walk into the building wearing their own mask, and then they can put that away safely in their purses and use it to go home. But then they can use the mask that they're going to get from us that were made from the Launchpad folks, and they can keep that mask, take it home and wash it and wear it on their next shift. But there will also be disposable masks as well.
Yeah, and I see a lot of comments. Thanks, everybody. It's just we had a couple people asking about that, and I thought I'd ask and find out. Thanks.
There are a number of comments trickling in the chat, so I'm going to just summarize them quickly in case you're not able to scroll through them. Indian Trails will have face shields and face masks for the drive-up staff in phase 2. Dana says that at Des Plaines, they're also looking into safety glasses for curbside deliveries. Anne mentioned that they're trying to logistically figure out how to have only specific staff use specific workstations within the library. I assume that would help with, having to clean computers and keyboards in between staff working on different devices. Lisa had a comment about free and grace days. If your library currently does not use free days or grace periods, CCS can absolutely work with you to set those up. So you'll just open up a help ticket and we can get started working with you on that. And then a number of staff have said that they are allowing staff to use their own masks if they would like.
And it sounds like Round Lake has a mask committee. That's fantastic.
Wow.
So I'm guessing you have some pretty crafty people on staff who are putting together masks for their coworkers. Nice.
Actually, yes, we do. And we are also making masks for the community. We have a large Hispanic community, and this team has been working very hard. We're providing them through the Mano a Mano organization that reaches out to the Latin community, the Latin American, and also a few other organizations like stores and things like that. We've been providing, especially since this the mandatory issue came out about it, May 1st, or whatever day it was, May 1st. So we have been providing to the community as well. So they've been sewing away, myself included, and I haven't sewn for like 25 years, so go figure. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. I'm sure at some point, I'm sure you guys are ready to like do this in your sleep by now with all those masks you're making.
Can I ask a question of everyone? Has anyone developed a system for asking staff when they come to work to fill out a form just saying that they do not have the virus, they have not been in contact with someone who's had the virus, etc., etc. An actual formal form that just states categorically that they are fit and well to come to work? Because it's something we have been considering at Wilmette. And I might just mention at this stage that we just had a meeting at Wilmette, and the consensus was that we will not be offering either curbside or item return services June 1st. We're going to wait until the governor's stay-at-home order has been mitigated. So this is dependent on our director meeting the board, our library board next week, and also with the CCS governing board as well. But at the moment, that's probably our situation at Wilmette. No curbside and no returns for the moment. So just to get that on the table there as well. But going back to the form where you ask specifically staff members to confirm formally that they have not got the virus or have not been in contact with someone who has had it.
Maggie from Round Lake. I am part of the reopening committee. Anyway, we have posed that question to Human Resources, HR, and I've talked to the director and I said, you really have to discuss this with our lawyer and HR and formulate a plan. We would like to have a form for people to sign in, because if it comes that COVID starts spreading, to be able to contact trace, even if we're just staff, because not all staff is going to be following the same schedules we have been. So we did recommend that there be a part there that says I don't have a fever. We've also ordered thermometers for people who want to check their temperature when they come in. But we recommend on the form that it should have, I'm free of a fever or whatever. And I think, as I've mentioned to them, I am assuming that that would protect the library from some kind of liability. I don't know or not, because I'm not a lawyer, nor am I in Human Resources. But that was the recommendation that our team sent to the director and HR.
So Ginny mentioned that if you are a member of HR Source, they have a sample employee health questionnaire. So if your library is contemplating this or wants to look into it, it sounds like HR Source might be a good place to check in with.
I think some good comments are being brought up in the chat about scheduling for staff. This was brought up yesterday at the technical services group as well, that many libraries are setting up staggered shifts for employees to make sure that you have as few staff interacting with each other as possible, and that if a staff member on a given shift was to become ill with COVID, that it would sort of minimize risk exposing the rest of the staff to the virus. So at yesterday's meeting, they briefly shared the different ways that they were staggering staff. Some were having certain shifts work, Monday, Tuesday, and then other shifts work Wednesday, Thursday. Some were doing times of day splits. So example, having one group work 9 to 1, another group 1 to 5, the last 9 to 5. So it seems like libraries have varying ways that they're managing that scheduling.
Can I just, sorry, Michael.
No, please, go ahead.
That was our plan before we made this decision today, was to have specific teams and specific days, so that if we knew that one of those team members contracted the disease, then those other staff members would have to not work for 2 weeks. So you'd have specific teams, and so you'd know through tracing that that team could not come into work if a fellow team member was sick. So
Michelle posed a good question. What's the maximum number of people you're allowing to work in the building at once? So I know Rosa said 20, right? Correct, at Indian Trails. Yeah. Does anyone else have any guide, and I know it's probably different for each library because you know, all the libraries are different in terms of the size of their building and the size of their staff.
Lake Forest, we've been going over that. Went in one day with the management team to kind of look at offices and things like that. Yeah, we're talking set teams as well, so it's easy to know. We don't have to guess who was in. A sign-in sheet. We're not taking temperatures because it's not really a good indicator. And as they say, can be faked. So, but yeah, we're going to only be able to probably do 5 or 6 people in the building because we're small, very tight, narrow. Choozy and I can't be in at the same time. We're too close together in the offices. So yeah, the teams are having to be broken up too, based kind of on what people you'll need there. I think our tech teams may go in later in the day after most of the stuff has been processed and done, so they can sit in back and work. But yeah, we can only have 1 or 2 at a time, so we're not going to be able to have more than 5 or 6 people, at least at the beginning, until even after that it might be hard.
Yeah. It looks like from the comments, we've got some, Winnetka Northfield is hoping for pods of 4 to 6 people. Lake Villas, possibly 6 to 8 per team. Tech would have separate teams. So again, yeah, I bet this is definitely going to depend, like Tori said, on the layout of your library, how close of quarters is everyone working in, how far apart are the departments going to be. Yeah, and Round Lake is also recommending all staff that are able to work from home continue to work from home. Going on to the next question, if that's okay. Are any libraries talking about additional steps to disinfect materials in addition to the quarantine period? This sounds like a no. Cool.
I do think that they're planning on certain surfaces that are easy to wipe down. I'm not exactly, I keep hearing that they're waiting for reports, but if it's not going to be till August, we can't wait that long. I'm not exactly sure. I mean, DVD, CD cases and things, yeah, we'll probably wipe those down. But the books that aren't covered, I'm not exactly sure. I haven't read enough. Nobody seems to be able to give a definite answer of what to do there. So I'm a little, that's why I think the quarantine time has gone up.
Yeah, Anastasia made the point that, well, we've got a lot of no's in the comments. And Anastasia mentions that she feels like it puts staff at an increased risk, which is a valid point. It just, you know, increases the amount of time, amount of contact that your staff have with the items. Tuesday asks, are places able to get enough PPE supply? So any libraries have success stories with obtaining PPE, or any libraries have run into issues obtaining PPE so far?
I'll chime in again. Indian Trails has struggled to get some material. We ordered supplies from April 20th on, and we have received some stuff like hand sanitizer, the large, gigantic 40-ounce bottles, and then individual bottles for all staff, and gloves, but there are still some things that are outstanding that they keep telling us that are on their way and they just haven't come. So we've gotten shields, that's why we made our own masks for our staff. And we do have disposable masks as well. And we are still waiting on gloves, although we do have some. We have some Lysol wipes, but we're still waiting on that as well. So we reached out to distilleries that were making hand sanitizer as well, and we got some from there as well. So we've had to get pretty creative in getting supplies or make them ourselves. So that's where we are.
Yeah, that was smart, going to distilleries. So yeah, it sounds like it's kind of a mixed bag based on the comments. So it sounds like some libraries are able to get mask cleaners, but then there's delays on face shields. Highland Park is in search of hand sanitizer if anyone has an in. If your library has ordered face shields, if you wouldn't mind just chatting your source in the comments box, just so libraries who are in search of face shields kind of have a point of reference of maybe where to check in with. Okay, so I figure this will be probably a pretty big question. How and where are you planning on returning or quarantining return materials? Are you using your meeting spaces? Are you using your circ workroom? What's your current plans on quarantining materials?
RLK, Maggie, we have a meeting room that has a divider, so we can divide it in half. And what we've proposed is to use one half to quarantine our items that are coming from the patrons, and also items that are going to be quarantined from vendors, the books that are ordered, things like that. So that will be quarantined on one side. On the other side, we are going to make that an exit for staff, because if we have a sink there, and when they're ready to leave, they can wash their hands before they walk out the building. So that's how we're handling our quarantined items. I hope we have the space. If not, I'll start to cry. Thank you.
Looks like most libraries are chiming in the chat that you'll be repurposing your meeting rooms to store your quarantine materials as well.
I think it was refers to it as book jail.
Yes, book jail.
Book jail.
Anastasia had a comment about using your sorter. So CCS does recommend that you quarantine materials prior to running them through your sorter. In the event that any sort of virus particle that would be living on a material that was returned would then stick or stay in your sorter and then potentially infect other materials that were then run through that same sorter. So we do recommend you quarantine your materials prior to putting them in your sorter. And again, our recommendation is that you quarantine materials, again, prior to checking them in as well. So another reason to wait until they've been quarantined for that 7 days before you put them through your AMH.
Okay, I thought I heard something about overloading the systems with our sorters.
It wouldn't have any impact on the ILS that I can think of right now. Again, we're hoping we've extended due dates. So we do have a lot of items that are going to fall due on July 1st. But it seems like libraries are gradually asking patrons to bring their returns back. So hopefully that will help mitigate sort of this onslaught of thousands of items being returned at one time. And again, I think this is also part of your patron communication strategy. I don't know if this is on the agenda later on that we'll talk about how you're communicating with your patrons potential changes in service, but talking to your community about returns, and there has been some discussion about staggering returns at some libraries. And Mako, am I jumping ahead in the agenda here? I don't know if that's something, if anyone is planning to stagger returns, if that's something you want to talk about your ideas.
I think people are going to return things when they want to, as soon as we
Same. Same. They just want to bring the stuff back right now, I think. In the technical services meeting yesterday, a couple libraries said, doesn't matter if the book drop's closed, the patrons are going to stack the books next to the book drop because they want to give it back to you. So I know it's difficult to encourage patrons to keep the materials, but some libraries have mentioned that their strategy for returns involves, in the tech group, a couple of people mentioned they were trying to investigate potentially staggering returns by day of the week, by patron's last name. So I'm not quite sure if anyone is talked about those and is planning to implement them. And if so, feel free to chime in and share.
So at Park Ridge, that was our original idea, but when we do contact-free pickups, it's going to be by appointment. So we're going to encourage people to get on a schedule and return their last round of materials when they're picking up their new materials. So we're going to have tables in front of the library in like a garbage bin for returns, and then our maintenance crew is just going to tie the bag up and move it to the quarantine area.
Yeah, it sounds like, so comment from Kayla Morton Grove saying they are playing with the idea of accepting returns like 1 or 2 days a week to kind of help space it out. Let me just go back up here so I make sure I don't miss any chats. Question from Kelly, and Kelly, I'm not sure if we have the information right now to answer this. Will we be asking rails to quarantine items for 7 days at their facility, or should we prepare to quarantine the rails deliveries once they're received at the library? I think there's still a lot left up in the air in terms of rails, since we don't have that IMLS Battelle study yet.
Okay, I was just making sure it was going to be at least considered.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
At this time, CCS's recommendation would be that you quarantine any incoming material for 7 days, whether it's returned by the patrons, by rails, or any items coming into your building. Our recommendation is that you quarantine them for 7 days.
Right.
And question of, are bins safe to quarantine, or is open air better? Again, that's something we might have more information on once the Battelle study comes out. And if anyone knows where to rent bins or containers from, if you could pop it in the comments, just to kind of share resources. Let's see. So we've got a library attempting to communicate to patrons to return by the first letter of their last name. So like A through E on Monday, next chunk of the alphabet on Tuesday, and so forth. So, you know, there's going to be people who listen to that, and there's going to be people who don't, but hopefully you've got enough, you know, it at least helps take the edge off. So to split it up a little bit. Okay. Oh, and thank you for everyone who's been popping their resources in for bins and face shields. I think they'll be very helpful for everyone. So yeah, this kind of like fits in with the last question in the safety section of the agenda, in terms of like your workflow for those returned items. I apologize if I misinterpreted this submission question, but I think people just were interested in kind of getting an idea of how you'll be collecting and quarantining the returned items, or once items are on hold, how you're going to be organizing and storing them in preparation for curbside.
It's a hard one to talk about because everybody is so vastly different, and having to go from 3 days to 7 days quarantine makes a big difference in the ability to control the flow. That's one of the things I'm going to be spending time tomorrow walking around the building trying to figure out, especially at the beginning when we've all had so much stuff out and people are going to be anxious to return it. I'm not exactly sure how it's going to work. I mean, we also realize too that once we start running the books through, we start dinging the holds. So we really appreciate you fixing that pick list so it doesn't look so quite so tragic. When I looked at it, it was like 500 things, and I'm like, oh dear Lord. So I think once we get over the hump, it's going to be easier to understand the workflow. We're still trying to work out exactly how we're going to manage the curbside from the back dock. So I'm not exactly sure what the workflow is going to be at this point. It's really finding the best way to rotate materials so I'm not running them through the whole building to quarantine them on the other side of the building once they've had a nice stroll through the library. So I think it's hard to know what people's workflows are going to be exactly, because I don't know if we can figure out how much we're all going to get back at the beginning. It could be more extensive, I feel, for Evanston and places like that. I can't imagine.
Maggie from Round Lake, we've decided, and of course, everything is a draft for us. Nothing is set in stone. For workflow, for the book drops, we're going to have one staff member handling those materials. And they will not handle any other materials because we don't want to cross-contaminate. So they're not going to be out doing a pick list. And that's what they'll be doing. And because we have a multitude of items out currently, and we're not planning to open up the return prior to offering limited services, they will have to get the book drop probably more frequently, because as we know, that people are going to be dying to get rid of stuff. And so that's kind of how we have it set up. So anything that comes through that drop, our book drop, and if it has a hold, it's just going to be quarantined anyway. So that when it's discharged 7 days later, it'll pick up that hold. Just, that's all we'll be doing. So just one person handling potentially contaminated materials only. And then, or one staff member, but we have 2 shifts we're working on. So that's kind of how I'm hoping to run it, so that we don't have cross-contamination of anything. Because if I have that same person discharging the quarantined items, obviously they could recontaminate them. So, but again, we're just, it's a rough draft, it's a work in progress, and we have to dig deep into it to figure it out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Lori from Des Plaines. One of the things that we are doing is very similar. Our book drop returns are only going to be coming through our book drops. Staff that are handling those returns pre-quarantine will, they are also our shelvers. So if they do pivot to post-quarantine shelving, they will then have to remove gloves, wash hands, do the hygiene that's recommended in between. But for the most part, we are trying to separate staff who handle pre-quarantine and post-quarantine materials. And we are also staggering, as of now, I think our plan is June 1st, staff comes back in, we start accepting returns. Curbside would be June 15th. So it would give us 2 weeks to get those materials back. As far as holds go, because we will trigger holds then, we are, I believe at this point, considering shutting off notification and calling patrons to see if they want holds before we then, so we'll trap them, we'll set them aside, and a group of people will be calling those patrons and saying, do you still want these holds? So it's going to be a lot of work in the beginning, but it's the best way we can control the flow of materials without triggering patrons holds notifications that tell them, hey guys, come pick this up when the library's closed. So we're still thinking through a lot of this stuff ourselves, but our basic premise is folks who are handling pre-quarantine are not going to be handling post-quarantine.
And you bring up a good...
Didn't you guys say you could put something in the hold notification thing indicating that it's different? We could give you wording, because I think some of my department heads were interested in that.
Yeah, absolutely. So yesterday, Rebecca sent to Governing Board a reopening survey that contains all the information CCS needs to modify your settings, including hold settings for reopening. We have a couple of options for managing holds once libraries resume checking in materials. One option is to turn off hold notices completely for your branch, for your library. That way, no notices would be generated and delivered, and then staff could manually call or email patrons to let them know when to come pick up their holds or how to pick up their holds, and then ask if they even want to come pick up those holds to begin with. We could also continue to send out hold notices for your library, but we can modify or customize the hold notice language to indicate whatever your curbside practices might be. So we have those two options that we can work with you on a library by library basis.
Barbara had a good question. Are libraries going to accept returns and also check out items at the same time? So does anyone have any plans drafted for how to handle simultaneous, or if they will be handling simultaneous returns and checkouts?
Indian Trails, Rosa, when we go into phase 2 and we open up our drive-up window, our book drop, we have a book drop right there as well. The staff member who deals with the drive-up window will only deal with drive-up staff, or a member, sorry, and someone else will be handling book drops. We did not shut down our book drops from the last day we were there, which was March 16th. They have been open this whole time. So we have gotten hundreds and hundreds of materials returned already that have been in quarantine for way past their time. They're already sitting in a room ready to go. I've gone in and I've streamlined all of the collections so that it's easier and more efficient for everyone to check them in. So our plan is very similar to the young lady who spoke before about putting everything in our large meeting room and putting up our partition wall, and one side will be for 2 check-in staff, 8 feet apart or more, and the other side will be for other carts that have been quarantining all this time since March 17 and on, and then we'll rotate in our 7-day, now from 3-day to 7-day, we'll rotate in those carts to go into quarantine. But any staff member that's scheduled, we've created a document that if you're shelving, you're only shelving. If you're emptying the book drop, you're only emptying the book drop. If you're at the drive up, you're drive up. If you're pick list, you're pick list. If you're filing holds, that's all you're doing nothing else. And so the reason for us doing a 4-hour shift is because we're trying to eliminate anyone longer than that that requires a 30-minute lunch break or supper break or whatever. So again, we're following very similar to other people who have already separated their material, as well as staggering the staff that start either at 7:15 all the way till 3:34, 4 o'clock, 4:15, so that we're separating them not just by their shifts, but also by the times they start and leave the building as well. Yeah. But no one's going to be touching two different service stations. They're not. It's just going to be one person on that shift.
Yeah, that's good. I know. Yeah, I heard a couple times so far in the meeting about avoiding like the cross contamination between the non-quarantine items and the quarantine items. Louise, did you have something you wanted to say? I saw a raised hand.
Oh, yes, I have a question. If we're checking in our items that are being returned, and will anything, for example, a Wilmette item get trapped for displays patron for a hold, or will that not happen? Because I have a somewhat solution that we could incorporate if that happens.
At this time, CCS has modified the RTF for the request to fill cycle so that Wilmette items are only eligible to fill holds for pickup at Wilmette. So no Wilmette item will get sent in transit at the time of check-in to another CCS library. So we'll continue to have those settings in place until Rails resumes delivery.
Okay, thank you.
Intra-CCS lending again. Yeah, we wanted to avoid that happening. It'd be a lot of work for staff to deny the holds. So we just modified those settings to make sure that it's easier for you to just check in your materials without having to worry about that.
Thank you.
I have a question. This is Michelle from Displays. If governing board decides that only patrons with your card can check out at your location, are you guys going to be able to bulk do that, or will we have to manually deny a hold for somebody from another library and progress on?
The recommendation of CCS to governing board, which was approved by executive committee, so again, we'll go to governing board next week, is that libraries can decide whether they want to limit curbside pickup to just their patrons or allow any patron from any library to pick up holds. If you decide to limit holds pickup to only your patrons, we've been thinking about a lot of different ways of how we can manage that. What we could do is suspend all holds for pickup at displays, for example, that are not by your patrons. That way we'd suspend them until a date in the future so that as you're checking in materials, you wouldn't be trapping holds for, say, a Chicago patron or a Niles patron for pickup at displays. So that's one option. The downside to that is that patrons can go into the catalog and unsuspend their holds if they wanted to. So we'd have to sort of do a regular weekly or daily update to continue to suspend those holds. We also do have the option to prevent a non-displays patron from placing new holds for pickup at displays. So that would be preventing moving forward holds from being placed for pickup at your location if it's not your own patron. So we have a couple of ideas for how to do that. And again, we have this survey out to our directors to gather information about reopening from each library. So as we're getting those surveys back, we're opening tickets to work with each library individually to adjust these settings.
I have one follow-up about that.
Yes.
So I was looking at our pick list and we have about like 650 items on it, and that's just for pickup at displays. But as I was clicking through, there's a lot of people who are already on there, not displays. Would you be able to pull those out too?
Yeah, so what we could do is suspend those holds so that they wouldn't be eligible to be filled until a later date, and then they drop off your pick list.
Thank you.
I know it's a lot of different pieces and a lot of different things to consider. So I'm sure there's about a million things we haven't thought of yet. So as you're thinking these things through, please open a ticket and we can work through them together. There was a comment in the chat that I did want to address as well. I've got to go back up here. Hold on one second. There's a comment about Rails delivery. So how are libraries accepting returns when so many of the items that will be returned belong to other CCS libraries? And that's a really great point. As of this time, we do not know when Rails will resume delivery. We do have some information from Rails though. When Rails plans to restart delivery, they have said that libraries will get 2 weeks notice, so that you will know 2 weeks in advance that Rails will be coming to come pick up materials from your library. That first phase of those first delivery runs, they'll be to return material to you that is currently being held at the Rails sorting facilities. So again, we'll get 2 weeks notice for when Rails will be coming to drop off materials that they're holding right now. They'll do another run then to pick up materials that you're holding at your location that belong to other libraries. So they're planning sort of these initial runs to return and then pick up materials that you're holding. Outside of that, again, we don't know when normal delivery will begin, but libraries will just need to hold items that don't belong to them until Rails resumes regular delivery. So that's something just to plan for, is that as your patrons begin bringing back items, you're going to get items returned to you that belong to our other CCS libraries, and you'll have to have a plan for just storing those or setting them aside. Louise, I see your hand raised, so go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. For out-of-system holds, returns that our patrons have through OCLC and the other academics, Illinois. I'm considering just mailing those back, even if they're in state, just to get them back and out of the OCLC. Is anyone else planning an ILL procedure like that? For sure it's going to work for out of state, but I'm planning to do that for the in-state out of CCS.
Hi. Yeah, I'm planning to do that as well. And the other good thing is through OCLC, which you're probably aware of this, Louise, they have a thing set up where you can check to make sure that that library that you have their material for, that they're accepting returns at this time. So it's a good source to check. And then also you can update your status as well if you're sending things or not, you know, or if you're accepting returns on your items. So
Yes.
yeah, I would be on mailing things back as well.
Right. I've gone through that. Thank you, Stephanie.
It's good to know.
Maggie from RLK, we're going to be planning to also quarantine items that come from the mail and things like that until they're clear. And then we'll be mailing them back. Except for what we currently have, we have a lot sitting at our library right now, and that will be sent off immediately. But after that, we will be quarantining any item that comes in to the library.
And this is Lori from Displays. When we're taking patron returns, we are just going to be packing blue bins for when Rails is up and running and putting things in transit, because we want to make sure we check them in to get them off the patron's card. And it will be clear then in LEAP that these are sitting waiting for Rails to come up and running, at least for CCS libraries, which I think is the bulk of the stuff that we receive via van delivery. So we're just going to plan on packing blue bins like we normally do and sending them aside until Rails is up and running, so we don't have to handle those materials more than once.
That's a good call. I'm going to take this moment. I don't know if you all saw in the Rails e-news yesterday, they linked to a reopening and delivering survey. So they're very interested in hearing about some elements from libraries. So I do have the survey up. I'm going to share the link in the chat. It is also available in their on their COVID-19 page on their website. But if you guys just make sure your libraries fill that survey out, I'm sure that would be very helpful for Rails to have that information. Let's see, let me just go back through the chat a little bit, make sure I haven't missed any questions. Oh, there was a question that came up about placing banners in the pack. So yeah, so if you are interested in kind of modifying pack language or adding a banner, open a help desk with CCS. We can, I say we, Kathleen, she's our pack maven. She will be able to work with the library on to get some customizations and to help with patron communication. Let's see. Luciano asks, how can we ensure that book drops are sanitary for patrons since they have handles and patrons need to touch? That is a very good question. Any libraries have been working on like a sanitation process for their book drops? Well, now you will. I'm just kidding. That's a good question, Luciano. And if anyone, as they're developing their plans, if they anyone has some tips or tricks for sanitizing book drop handles, please feel free to share. Oh, Highland Park is lucky there's no handles on theirs.
RLK, Maggie, we are going to create, well, we're hoping maintenance will create a list of frequently touched items, not just the book drops, but everything, light switches, door handles, and they're going to routinely be sanitizing them. It's not a perfect solution, but I think with the environment we're in, if I were returning something, believe me, I'd have my little hand sanitizer there, and I'd be washing my hands the minute I could get some water. But that's, I think, the best that we're going to be able to do is have maintenance go around, and like, I don't know what they're going to be doing hourly or what, and just doing it, because we have a cleaning service, so they don't really have to clean the library. So just getting all that sanitation done on an hourly, half-hour basis. I don't know what the head of maintenance is going to decide, but that's our thoughts on how to keep things clean. Also, as myself, as I told my team, I'm very OCD. I'm going to be cleaning my own place. If I have to touch that copier, you're not going to believe I'm not going to trust nobody. I'm going to go there with my little Clorox, like clean it off before I touch it. So again, people might also have that thought like me, OCD, and have something to clean it before they touch it, or wear gloves. A lot of people are wearing gloves now that they go into stores and stuff. Anyway, thank you again.
Thanks, Maggie.
There was a
Oh, sorry, Deb, go ahead.
I was going to say there was a comment in the chat from Katie asking if there was a way CCS could create a list of considerations that libraries should reach out to CCS about. I think that's your question, prior to starting curbside and accepting returns. So as I mentioned, we did send out a survey to LibAdmin, to our directors. And this survey contains information that CCS needs to make sure that we can support you prior to reopening. I just put a copy of that survey into the chat. So it is reopening survey preview. So it's just a Word document that lists out all of the questions that we're asking libraries in this survey. So feel free to take a look. That's the kind of information that CCS will need in order for you to restart services. So again, your director got a copy of this survey. So I'd talk to them in order to complete that and make sure it's getting filled out accurately.
There was a question about adding links to email or text notices. So I actually experimented with, I think we Morton Grove last week on this. You can add a URL to an email, but it won't be hyperlinked. If we try to add in like any HTML, it just copies that entire code. So the patron sees all the code and it's not actually linked, which is very unfortunate. In terms of text notices, any link that we add into a text notice, and this might depend on the cell phone provider, but in their experiments, the links will open up to the web page. So if you were interested in modifying any kind of hold notice text, open a ticket. We can do some experimenting before you start checking items in and triggering notices. This kind of gets into maybe one of the more general or broad questions about what your process is going to be for curbside pickup. And this is definitely going to differ from libraries who have the drive-through window versus libraries who don't. There was a chat in there from Dana at Displays earlier about, I think, having patrons open their trunk and putting bagged items directly into the trunk to keep it as contactless as possible. Are there any other libraries who had a process drafted that they'd be interested in sharing?
I did write up a procedure document, so I could share that. It's largely based on I can't remember the name of the library, I apologize, who had a pickup procedure, so I kind of adapted that for WOMET's purposes. So I can share that. If people just get in touch with me and ask for it, I will certainly pass it on. Okay.
Cool. Thanks, Luciana. Highland Park is doing a grab and go procedure. So would that be like having the table out and you know, the staff putting, oh, thanks, Robin, she's going to share it. Yeah, I think I've heard from some libraries, yeah, who will set a table up, like Robin says, in the vestibule, put the items in, I'm guessing labeled with the patron's name, so they can just grab without having to come in contact with a patron or, yeah, staff member. Yes, and thanks to anyone who's already shared procedures on the listserv. Those have been great to see as they've been circulating around. So question, how are you verifying their card with grab and go? Will it be, will your library have any kind of verification process, or will it be a trust thing?
So we did that briefly before we closed down completely. And so we basically checked them out, but we were calling them because the automated notices were still going out. So we had to actually call people and say, ignore that automated notice. Your package is now ready now. So we're trying to avoid that by harnessing the power of the automated notices. But we would just check the materials out to them, and then they would come and pick them up. And that worked. I mean, so far I have had absolutely now it's been months and absolutely nobody has said we didn't get our materials or complained about it. And I'm sure they would, because they would.
Let's see, it sounds like there's some libraries who are finalizing procedures. So we'll probably see some more, maybe some more sharing on the listserv.
And I did reach out to the Fountaindale Public Library, opened up last week for curbside pickup. So Amna, their head of circulation, was kind enough to share her procedures for curbside with me. So I'll ask her permission, but as long as she gives me the go ahead, I'll send those out to the circ list as well. They've already opened, so she might have revised them and tweaked them after their first week and a half of curbside. So that might be helpful.
Sounds like there's a lot of drive up window envy. Got it, I got it.
Yeah, Lake Forest is doing a lot of trusting. I'm issuing temporary cards. I'm doing a very, if any, cursory check unless I don't recognize the street. And we're just limiting it. We just aren't having enough people coming in and using things online to make it an issue. And when we were closing up, before we closed up, we just checked it out to people and had their name on the bag and it was good to go. We're just gonna have to assume a certain amount of roll with it, but we are a smaller community, so it's a little easier to do that. But yeah, we're gonna check it out to them and it will be bagged and ready to go with their name on it. We're assuming they're not going to come by to pick it up if they don't know about it, especially with what they'll have to go through to get up to the door and get it. There's discussion of putting names in the car window. We've gone from curbside to mailing to the back dock to over on the side with the tent. So it kind of depends. It should be fun though.
Tori, you're always so positive. I love it. Danny from Glencoe did comment. Glencoe is our first library that has started offering curbside pickup. They did a soft rollout starting this past Monday. Danny, I don't know if you are still here. There's so many people to scroll through. If you'd be willing to unmute yourself for a minute and possibly share your experiences at Glencoe this week and how it went.
Yeah, sure, Deborah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we decided kind of abruptly, middle of last week, we were going to start this on Monday. So it's been a challenge to get it together. Although patron-wise and even staff-wise, it's been very positive. Patrons are thrilled, as you might imagine. We're only doing it for Glencoe patrons. It's a soft rollout this week, only for items on the hold show if you can't call and have us pull something this week. So everybody is getting an updated hold notice that says curbside is now an option and they can call. We're using 4-person teams, although I'm also a floater and I do a bit of everything. For scheduling, we're using a nice program called Calendly, which is like the word calendar, except the last 2 letters are LY. It's really works pretty well for the most part for the scheduling. 5-minute increments. We are 4 hours a day, Monday through Friday. We stagger it Tuesday, Thursday, go a little later. And I hope you have more lead time than we did to figure this out. There's more moving parts than you'll realize. But you know, like I said, staff-wise and patron-wise, it's been very positive.
Thanks, Danny.
Sure. And CCS has been wonderful in helping us.
Oh, thanks, Danny. Let's see.
I put the Calendly link in the chat box if anyone wanted to take a look at that.
Yeah, thanks, Deb.
We did get a question about the Palatine Library and the Palatine project, so I'll take just a quick second to address that. We are still moving forward with both Palatine and Grace Lake. So we've been very busy over this past month working with both of those libraries on the different phases of their project. So we are continuing as scheduled with both of those with an anticipated go live weekend of Labor Day. So we're still planning to have those 2 libraries live in CCS the week after Labor Day. So props to everyone at Palatine and Grace Lake. They have really done a wonderful job managing the migration project with all of the unexpected COVID-19 library closures. So we have to give them like the biggest round of applause ever. They are knocking it out this year in 2020. So they've done great. Yes, and Tori is waving her flower over there. They deserve all the flower waves. So no, there's no delay with that project. We're moving ahead as planned. Yes, and Jenny is very excited. So thank you.
Let's see. Was there anything else that we missed on there? Rosa says drive-up windows will now be going into all the library budgets. Could everyone who is doing curbside please let us know? Maybe create a list.
Can you repeat that, Mieko?
Oh, sure. There's a question. Could everyone who is currently doing curbside please let us know? Please create a list. I believe Glencoe is the only one actively doing curbside at this point.
And I will say CCS has gotten survey responses back from, let me just take a look, only from 9 libraries. So we only have plans from 9 of you. So I know everyone else is considering many things and are still working on your plans. So once we have responses back from all of our libraries, we can put something up on the learning portal and share that with the membership. So we can keep you posted, but right now Glencoe is the only library who's started curbside. Fox River Valley is planning to start delivery, I believe. And then after that, I don't believe we have anyone else who is starting curbside in May that we know of. So everyone else is waiting till June 1st or later.
I'm not sure. I think I was, Chusey said something. I could be wrong, Chusey. You can type it in because I'm not sure if you can get on. But even though they're not in CCS, I believe Lake Bluff maybe have started curbside. So they're not in the group, but they're a small library that I think might have already started.
And I believe Fountaindale, as I mentioned, Shorewood, I believe Naperville has started curbside. And there are a handful of others that have already started as well.
Yeah, I was just trying to think of libraries that, even though they're not in our system, they might have a suggestion or an idea, because I assume they're probably doing like us and only doing what's in the building and what they have for their patrons.
So from Carrie, update from Carrie at Fox River Valley, their board meets next Tuesday. And if they approve delivery, they'll be starting that Wednesday. So they may be our second official library starting with curbside. And Anastasia asks if most people waiting until June 1st or when Illinois goes into the next phase per the governor. So if you can quickly chat, or if you want to chime in, how your library is kind of using that, which metric is your library using, calendar versus the Reopen Illinois plan? Wish I knew. Everything is so up in the air right now.
Mieko, can you clarify what it is you're asking for me, please?
Yeah, definitely. So when your library is talking about restarting services, particularly curbside, are you using a calendar date as a metric? So like saying our target is June 1st? Or are you going to use the governor's Reopen Illinois plan? So kind of use those phases, like we're not going to start until phase 3 officially begins or phase 4 officially begins.
Okay, well, I'll try to answer it. Hopefully I'm giving you what you need. Indian Trails has plans to go back into the building on May 26th, staff only, circulation specifically only, and parts of material. And that's to take in all Federal Express and UPS deliveries for our materials, new materials, and for circulation to check in and shelve materials. That's phase 1. Phase 2 will be that's May 26th through June 5th, Monday through Friday, no weekends. And then probably phase 2, maybe June 8th, June 15th for our drive-up service and and then pick list for ITPLD members. That's our starting point. So we've got 2 weeks to get it together.
It's based on the comments, it sounds like it's kind of split. Some people are kind of using that calendar date. Some people are relying on the governor's plan in terms of services. I know, so thanks for coming, Maggie. We're getting to 12:30 and I know people are busy, they've got other meetings. So in the last like 5 or so minutes that we have, I don't want to completely dismiss the assisting patrons questions, because I thought those were some really good questions that were submitted. So real quick, if there are any libraries who have things they want to share about reaching out to patrons remotely, especially patrons who may not have email addresses, patrons who may be ESL. Just like, how have you been reaching out and interacting with patrons during this time? Any warm, fuzzy stories you want to share?
Adult Services at Indian Trails created an e-chat service, so members are able to call in. Plus, we have a call center now as well, but members have been able to communicate with staff. We all have been working remotely from home, all 102 of us, and we are answering email. We have contact us, so we're answering their emails about all kinds of questions. So we're talking to them via email, we're talking to them to e-chat. So we are doing story time via Zoom like other libraries are doing. So we are still trying to provide services to our taxpayers. So that's, I mean, call center. If a call center can't answer a question, they forward it to e-chat. If e-chat at Adult Services can't answer the question, then they forward it specifically to someone who does know the answer to that question, and then we take it from there.
Sounds great. I've been enjoying some of the chats that are coming in too. Highland Park's been doing sidewalk chalk art. Carrie has an Adopt a Patron program of letter writing.
I love that.
Yeah, lots of reaching out on social media, it sounds like, in the chat services. Story times, art programmings, either via Zoom or Facebook Live. Like I said before, when people were starting to come in, but I've really been enjoying like the short videos libraries have been posting on Facebook and on YouTube. They've been absolutely fantastic. Lake Villa created a list of patrons they called to see how they're doing. So just that, yeah, having that human element, just it's a very nice service. Displain says weekly kids display in the windows. Letter of the week with words and all of our puppets and stuffies. Yep, and it sounds like, so Crystal Lake's call center in the chat line. They do emails, make outreach calls to, doing online programs and story times for children and adults. So man, if there's one industry that is like super adaptable to any situation, it is libraries for sure. Yes, so thank you. Well, we do have, officially 5 minutes left. So if there is any last minute questions, any comments people have thought about to a previous question that they would like to post or contribute before the meeting is over.
It's Michelle from Displays. I have one question. I remember several weeks ago, I'm embarrassed to say this, but I think you guys sent out something about for us to tell you about our reopening plans. Is the link to that, because it changes every 15 minutes, I feel like, so I have not done it. So I can make up what we're thinking we're doing now. Is it just on the website?
Libraries were just emailing their reopening plans to the help desk. But now we do have a form that we've shared with Governing Board for libraries to fill out that includes the details that we'd like for your reopening. So if you just check in with your director, she should have gotten that survey. I can pop a link again into the chat that just
I saw that.
The
I just,
questions.
yeah, no, I saw that. I just didn't know if there was something else that you were referring to, because you said you got 9 responses back and I wasn't sure.
Yeah, that was from that same survey. So we're still waiting to hear from a lot of you on your reopening plans, but we did just share that survey with governing board yesterday. So I think you guys still have some time to get that back to us. So I am also going to put in the chat the link to register for the member update, which will be on Thursday, May 28th. So I'm going to share it in CCS News tomorrow as well. But if you wanted to get a head start and register for that webinar, we'll be reviewing all of the governing board decisions that are made next week at their May meeting. So feel free to sign up. We'd love to see all of you. I think we had 275 people at the last member update, which was crazy. So we're hoping to see all of you there as well in a couple weeks.
Deborah, may I applaud you on your very effective last week tonight look that you have with your camera. You look like John Oliver against the background, all white background. I applaud you.
This is like the cleanest part of my house is the wall behind me. So I've got to be facing away from my pets and all of my books. Thank you, Tori. I appreciate that.
Well, we've got, I think we're going to do this again in June.
Yes.
And we can see if someone wants to put up like a really creative virtual background or something. But yeah, so yeah, we'll pick a date in June for another networking meeting. We'll get the sign up sheet out so you guys can submit agenda items. We might be talking about the same thing. We might be talking about totally different things. Who knows where we'll be in June. But yeah, but thank you, sincerely, thank you all for coming. This was definitely the highlight of my week, is being able to hear voices again, see faces again. And just I hope everyone stays safe, and good luck with everything that you're working on. So thank you all for coming, and we hope to see you again soon.
Yes, and we'll share this recording in the newsletter tomorrow, and then all of the chat as well. So there were some really great comments in that chat, so I don't want anyone to miss them. So we'll share both of them tomorrow. So we'll talk to everybody soon. So good to see everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.